Welcome to Suspense She Shed Sunday, where you get to hear true crime right from my she shed. My name is Holly, and if you hit like and subscribe, this is a story that spans 3 generations, and we're going to discuss, does evil breed evil, like in your DNA? Or is it nurture and environment that causes this? We are going to discuss the true crime story of the Weavers, a family of evil. Let's start at the beginning with the grandfather, who wasn't a grandfather yet. We're going to start at his childhood. And his name is Ward Weaver Jr. Not sure if you heard about him. He was abused by both his mother and father. I think by far his mother was the worst. Listen to this. She would often bite Ward until he bled. That was one of her disciplines for him. His mother had been a prostitute. That is actually how she met Ward's dad. He paid for her services and he liked what he got, so he married her. His mother had a huge hate for men, and I don't know if it's because she was into prostitution, but she would often tell her sons that they should be castrated. Wow. She made Ward sleep in the same bed as her, and that even included on Ward's wedding night. Can you believe that? It is an unknown if she sexually abused him, but what's your opinion on that? That's just too strange. When Ward's sister was 6, he took a hatchet and cut one of her fingers off. Then when she was 7, he hung her by a noose in the woods and left her hanging there for hours before he come back and get her. Wow. He started molesting her with sticks at 9, and by 12, it turned into full-fledged rape. It makes you wonder what actually went on that to him that he was that evil. And as most serial killers, he also loved torturing animals. He would find cats, rub them with sandpaper until their skin was raw, and then pour turpentine on their wounds. In 1967, he joined the Army, and he was in Vietnam for 1 year during the war. He stated he once saw his Army buddies taking turns raping a Vietnamese woman with her father's permission. And then her father slit her throat. Wow. This only further messed up an already messed up mind. After the war, he said he kept listening to the voices in his head because they had kept him alive during the war. But you're going to later learn he shouldn't have listened to those voices because he wouldn't be in so much trouble. When he returned from the war, he married high school classmate Trish, and they lived with Ward's mom and dad. Ward's mom made Trish's life a living hell. Trish ended up having 3 children, one being Ward Weaver III, and he'll come in later. Trish got tired of Ward's mom being so mean to her, and she asked Ward to do something about it. His answer was to beat his wife up for talking about his mom like that. He didn't like your mama jokes, I guess. I don't know. She only could handle 6 years before she took all her kids and left. He remarries after Trish leaves and becomes a long-distance truck driver. On September 26, 1976, Ward spotted a young girl named Bobby Brown who was getting off from work that night. He asked her if she wanted to go for a ride. He then told her he drove a big rig and asked if she'd like to see his big rig. Unfortunately, Bobby said okay. While he was showing her his truck, he ended up striking her over the head with a bat. She was still conscious, so it didn't knock her out, so he covered her mouth and threatened to kill her if she didn't do exactly what he asked her to do. He shoved her into his truck, but when he went around to get in the driver's side, Bonnie was smart because she just took off whenever he went around. And she was able to escape. She just started screaming and yelling. And that is a smart thing to do. That's the best thing to do, ladies. Tip there. And so it worked, and witness heard, and they were able to get his license plate number before he left. Ward actually just turned himself in because he knew the authorities were looking for him. So the police asked him what he would have done with the girl. And you won't believe this, but he actually admitted he would have raped and killed her. I don't know if that was his way of trying to get help or what. He was then charged with attempted assault and attempted murder. And he could have got out of those charges, murder anyway, because he just admitted to it. But the murder charges were dropped anyway, and he only had to serve 3 years. After leaving prison, he even sought help at a VA hospital, but they turned it down because of availability issues. In April 1981, a young couple, David and Michelle, were hitchhiking to Wairika, California to go hang out with Michelle's uncle. Ward decided to pick them up and give them a ride. But when they got to the uncle's house, he wasn't there. And it would be 2 weeks before the uncle would actually come home. So Ward said, "Why don't you just come stay with me for a few days back at my place?" So, unwisely, they decided to. So they stayed at his house a couple of days. He then told David he could help him find a job. So Ward drove the couple to meet a man named Gerald. Unbeknownst to them, they actually had an evil scheme and plan. This man named Gerald, Ward had actually given him a gun, and then he drove him over there to see Gerald, and he told David he could go with Gerald and Michelle could stay with him. Gerald took David to a secluded spot and shot him. Though David was shot into the head 3 times, he managed to make it back to the road, miracle, miracle, and get help. Meanwhile, Ward took Michelle and sexually assaulted her and raped her by gunpoint. And then he took her to his house after that. He took her to town and dropped her off where she eventually got help. Well, at least he did that. He did end up getting charged for imprisonment, rape, and attempted murder. He ended up having to serve 42 years for this. While at prison, Ward befriended another inmate and began to trust him. He ended up telling the inmate he had killed an airman and his girlfriend. The inmate decided this may be enough information to get him released early. And so, guess what? He ratted him out. The authorities decided to investigate and found out that this was true. It was discovered that a young couple he killed was Robert Radford, who was 18, and Barbara Levoy, 23. They had met while Robert was doing basic training in Colorado. After leaving basic training, the couple went to visit Robert's parents. Their car broke down while trying to get to their first tour of duty at Nellis Air Force Base. So the first man that stopped to help them, they decided not to leave with because he was going to drop them off in the opposite direction from the way they were traveling. This is when Ward passed them in his semi and circled back to ask if they needed help. The rest of this story I'm going to actually tell from what Ward told investigators. Ward stated that he had been taking amphetamines and had been awake for a week and a half when the crime occurred. He stated that when he picked them up, he had noticed how attractive Barbara was, and he became aroused. Disgusting. It's not something I want to think about if you see his picture. He said he then started hearing the voices in his head to rape Barbara, and he also said the male voice told him to hit Robert with the pipe. He then told them he had to pull over because he had heard something moving around in the back of his truck. So he asked Robert, will you go back there with me and let's take a look? So Robert went back with him, and when they got to the back of the truck, Ward actually got a pipe out of the back and hit Robert in the head. And so Robert started screaming, and he told him to shut up. I don't know exactly what he thought he was going to do after he hit him. Did he think he was going to say, man, you're funny? I don't know. But then after he told him to shut up, he hit him a couple more times. And the whole time saying he only meant to knock him out and not kill him. So he got back in the truck. Barbara asked, where is Robert? And he just pulled out his knife and began driving. That'd be scary, would it not? You thought you were safe with your boyfriend or husband, and then all of a sudden you're with this strange man? Oh, that'd be so scary. He drove a little ways, then pulled over and raped Barbara. An hour later, he pulled over again and assaulted her again. He then instructed Barbara to sit quietly in the floorboard while he delivered his truckload. And she sat there for about 45 minutes quietly waiting on him. Oh, I can't believe it. I guess she was so scared she just did it. I don't know. He was pulled over by highway patrol when he was going to get the new load. But he did state Barbara complied to his instructions. Ladies, it's your time to speak up. If something was going on, you got stopped by a cop. To me, wouldn't it be better to have a chance there to then go off with this guy where you don't have any help? I guess she was just so terrified, but I don't know how I'd react. And I guess we don't know how we'd react in that circumstance. So on his way home about 11 at night, and just a few miles from his home, he stopped and told Barbara that he was going to tie her under a bridge that he had stopped at and leave her there all night. And when he come back by to take his load somewhere, he would pick her up the next day. And then he said he would release her at a warehouse at that time. So he grabbed a fabric diaper from his truck and walked her down under the bridge, and he tried to gag her with it. He stated this is when she bit his thumb. And you know how he is. He got bit by his mom, so it reminded him of that, and it made him so angry. This is when he hit her twice with his fist. He then took that fabric diaper and wrapped it around her neck. Then he realized she was no longer biting him. And this is when he realized that she was not breathing. So he stopped, and he ended up digging a shallow grave under that bridge and buried her under the bridge. He then went into town to meet his wife, who worked at a local restaurant on a late shift. And so I guess they went and maybe ate together real late. And then he came back in her car. She was still at work, and he came back in her car, dug up Barbara's body, and brought it to his house. When he got to his house, his 3 children were awake when he got there, and they asked him what happened to his bloody thumb. He said that he had gotten in a fight with someone, and they should stay in the house just in case that guy came back. So they were kind of scared, so they did what he said. Then he carried her body in the backyard and threw her body in a trench he had dug for a sewer line a while back. There's one that he hadn't filled in. And then a few weeks later, he actually exhumed the body and dug a deeper hole under his wife's laundry line, then built a deck over it, and then told his wife it was so she wouldn't have to get her feet wet when hanging laundry. What a gent. Can you imagine learning that after he got arrested, that he actually made that because he had a body under there? After they heard this story, the police went out to his home and found the body. Her body was too decomposed to tell the cause of death. He ended up being put on death row in San Quentin State Prison in California. But listen to this. As of 2021, due to a ballot measure that passed in California, Ward Weaver Jr. soon could be released from death row and be put in the general prison population. That is messed up, California. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Makes some people mad, but I have never heard of a serial killer being put in general prison population. Ward is suspected of many more hitchhiker deaths and is thought to be a serial killer, although not proven. They have a lot of deaths that kind of match up to it. Remember his first wife, Trish, and how she left Ward Weaver Jr. with their 3 kids. Her oldest son's name is Ward Weaver III. Well, he is the next murderer we are going to talk about. So after leaving Ward Weaver Jr., she married another man named Bob Budrow. He was not much better than Ward Jr. at all. Why do women do that? Why do they go from one loser to another? Come on, didn't you learn a lesson? Wake up. Marry a good guy. Good guys are sometimes more fun. At least they give you things you want and build you she sheds. Come on, ladies. So, Bob, he was an abusive alcoholic who often would abuse his mom. He also abused the kids, too. He hit them with belts and whatever he had laying around. The mom said the stepfather had taken Ward on a trip one time, and Ward returned solemn and angry, and she stated that's when she lost him. She had suspected that he had been sexually abused by his stepfather, yet she still stayed with him. What in the world? This is when he started to really act up. His stepbrother was afraid of dogs, so he chained his brother to a tree and let the neighbor's mean dog out to scare him. The dog was snapping and growling at him, and Ward just thought it was the funniest thing. His sister Tammy said Ward III would sexually and physically abuse at least one member of the family before he was even 12 years old. Sounds like his dad, doesn't he? And he also shot her with his BB gun in the back. He thought that was so funny. In 1981, a teenage relative reported that he had repeatedly raped and beaten her, but prosecutors decided not to press charges because he had actually already enlisted in the armed forces and was leaving. During his time in the Navy, he met his future wife, Maria Stout, a native of the Philippines. He was discharged a year later due to his continual heavy drinking and not following orders. Imagine that. The couple moved in with Weaver's parents. Why does anybody move in with the parents after they get married? Not smart. Anyway, she ended up pregnant real soon after that. 5 months into her pregnancy, she was physically assaulted by Weaver. She checked into the hospital, but she refused to press charges on him. Right after that, their son Francis was born in December of 1982, though it was later determined that he was not even Ward Weaver's biological son. It is near this time that Ward Weaver Jr. was on trial for the murder of the Hitchhikers, and Ward III actually went to some of the trial and also visited his dad in jail. I guess maybe that's when he got a fascination with his dad. On Father's Day in 1986, Ward Weaver was a defeated man. The 23-year-old got no presents for Father's Day. His children had only recently been returned to him from foster care. Can't imagine why. And he was feuding with his wife again. So he drowned his troubles with 6 beers, 6 vodka screwdrivers, a little weed, and a gram of powdered speed. Shortly before midnight, 16-year-old Jennifer Ordana and her younger sister Jocelyn collected Weaver outside a bowling alley in Fairfield, California. Weaver and his wives were actually house guests of the Ordano family. So they didn't think it's a big deal to give him a ride. They picked him up in their family Dodge van. Moments later, they pulled over on a dark road so Weaver could relieve himself, and that's when he struck. So the van door blew open and a chunk of concrete struck Jennifer in her head. Her 100-pound body thudded on the metal baseboard. Without saying a word, Weaver grabbed Jennifer in a headlock and pulled her to the floor. "Ward," Jennifer said, struggling to be free. "What are you doing? It's me, Jennifer." She thought, what the heck? I thought he was our friend, and suddenly he was attacking her. 16 years later, Jennifer still vividly recalls the circumstance of that unprovoked attack. Weaver's face, she said, was as calm as a sleepwalker's. I guess it's like he was in a trance or something. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the assaults. After his release, Weaver and wife Maria relocated to Canby, Oregon, where they operated a store there. Maria gave birth to their fourth child, Mallory, in 1989. And in 1993, Maria Weaver filed a restraining order against her husband, and their marriage ended in divorce. And in July of 1995, Weaver met a new girl that was 18, and he was actually 31. Imagine this, Weaver beat his new girlfriend with a cast iron skillet. Her name was Christy Sloan. Does that shock you? He was jailed for the incident, but Sloan refused to testify against him. By October, they were back together, and in February 1996, they married. Why, just why would you do that? You know the marriage is not going to last, and it only lasted 4 years. Because it wasn't because he hit her and all of this. It's because he cheated on her with a new girl. And he then moved out of Sloan's house. So he moved to Oregon City with this new girlfriend, and they got a home there they rented. So Ashley Pond was a young girl that lived down the road from this new home. And she lived in apartments there and was best friends with Ward's daughter. Ashley Pond had a hard life. Her mom was a drunk that would often lock Ashley out of the house. She was raised by a stepfather whom she always thought was her real father until they ended up getting a divorce, and he wanted a DNA test, and she ended up not being his. At 8 years old, she met her real father and started staying weekends with him. And he started molesting her. And she finally reported him after a few years, and he was indicted on 40 counts of raping and abusing his own daughter. Sicko. Unfortunately, the house that she thought was safe, her best friend's house, was not any better. Ward knew she had been abused by her father and took full advantage of it. Ashley went on a 2-week vacation with the Weavers, and when she got back, she pretty much just started living with them full time. And I guess that's when Ward started making his move on her. It's sad that she had such an awful life that she felt that she could have a better life with the Weavers. That's horrible. She went from horrible to horrible. Ashley's teacher seen Ward kiss her one day and reported it, and they did not, no one did anything. Finally, Ashley turned Ward in for sexual abuse. Her real father seen this as a chance to get out of his convictions and told his lawyer, who used this as a defense. They used it as saying that Ashley was claiming everybody was assaulting her. And so they made them doubt her word. They even asked Ward to testify so it could prove that Ashley accused a lot of men of abuse, which is what I said. This was enough for her father's charges to actually be dropped. Shameful, isn't it? On the morning of January 9, 2002, Pond left her home at the New Well Creek Village Apartments to walk to the nearby bus stop. She never arrived. Unfortunately, Wade had convinced her to come to his house by using his daughter as an excuse. And at this point, it is unclear what actually Wade did to 12-year-old Ashley. Her friend Miranda was interviewed by a TV reporter after she went missing because they were looking for her. And here is the interview I'm going to show you. 2 months later, her friend Miranda would disappear as well.
In January, Miranda's classmate, Ashley Pond, had vanished. By sheer chance, I had spoken with Miranda about her missing friend.
It's really hard to believe that happened to one of your friends or something. It's just really different and really sad.
There were 90 sex offenders living in a mile radius from these girls' homes. Wow. Suddenly, Wade wanted to be in the limelight, letting everyone know that Ashley was his daughter's friend and doing all these interviews. Maybe he thought it would make him look more innocent, but it actually went the other direction. During the interview, the reporter actually had walked over Ashley's grave. Of course, she didn't know it. I'm going to show you that
Talked to him in July. Sleepovers he seemed excited describing when we first talked to him in July.
You could not walk anywhere in my front room without stepping on a body.
See, we were on to Ward Weaver based on a tip we received about the bushy-haired neighbor at the top of the hill. And it wouldn't take long in the course of this conversation to learn why.
They are hassling my family, my friends. They are saying that I am the #1 suspect.
He told me he flunked 2 polygraph tests, but also walked me through his home to show he had nothing to hide. A month later, I learned the truth. He was taunting me here. He'd already buried Ashley under this concrete slab, and he'd used this freezer to store Miranda's body. Realities that became evident by the end of the summer, bringing out the vulnerabilities.
On August 13th, 2002, Weaver's stepson Francis called police claiming that Weaver had attempted to rape his 19-year-old girlfriend. Here's a clip of that 911 call.
What do you think he did? I know what he did, man. He did for girls and raped the men and killed them.
And as you've seen in the call, he did suggest that his father had been involved in the murders of the 2 girls. Weaver was arrested for the attempted sexual assault, and law enforcement subsequently initiated a warrant to investigate his property. So Ashley's stepmother, who had suspected Weaver in both disappearances, erected a sign next to the concrete slab on his property, which read, "Dig me up," because she was sure that they were on his land. The FBI began a search of Weaver's property, and that was on August 24th, 2002. That day, FBI agents discovered little Miranda's remains inside of an empty microwave box in a storage shed behind Weaver's house. On August 25th, the remains of Ashley were unearthed from beneath the concrete slab that they had walked over in Weaver's backyard, where she had been stored in a 55-gallon drum underneath that slab. After the autopsy was done, it was said that Ashley was possibly put in a freezer for a while before she was buried, because her body was kind of mummified, and I guess that's like a sign of you had been frozen. Both of their bodies have been found in a fetal position, tied in cords. I guess that was keeping their bodies like that. Ward was sentenced to 2 life sentences without parole. In 2009, Gaddis' younger sister, Mariah, visited Weaver in prison on 2 occasions. She said, "I had to know what happened. It's the only way I could put it behind me," she told reporters. During the visit, Weaver admitted to murdering Ashley and Miranda with his bare hands and told Mariah that he planned to murder her next. He also said that he thought Miranda had seen something like stuff he was doing with Ashley's body. So he said that is why he actually murdered her too. Which I don't know if I believe that, because he said he was going to murder Mariah. So I think he just wanted to murder personally. Remember Ward's son that turned him in for trying to rape his girlfriend? Francis Weaver was his name? Well, you guessed it. He is now serving life in prison with possible release after 25 years. He has joined the rest of his family in prison. He decided to hatch up a plan with his friends to steal some weed from a drug dealer. Francis stole a gun from a friend's house and gave it to his friend Orrin. Then Francis told the drug dealer he knew a guy that would offer him a lot of money for his weed. Their plan was when the drug dealer got to Orrin's parking lot, Orrin lived in apartments, Orrin would convince him to go into these apartments with him, and then the others would break into the vehicle and steal the weed out of it. Well, the drug dealer wouldn't get out of his vehicle. I'm sure he probably suspected maybe something was up, so he wouldn't leave his truck. And so Orrin then took out his gun and shot the drug dealer in the face and the back, killing him instantly. So now little Francis, like I said, is in there in prison with his grandfather and his father. Wow, this family. Well, I guess on Francis, it was definitely nurture that caused this, because he was not Wade III's real son. My thought on this is nurture plays a huge role in a child's outcome. But I imagine DNA does have a small role as well. But when the two are combined, watch out. It produces pure evil. What do you guys think? Leave your comments below. Let me hear your theories on this. And I am so glad you guys joined me today. And I hope you'll hit that subscribe button and join me all the time in my she shed. I have a lot of fun in here. You guys can have fun too. And I will tell you bye. And I'll leave you some safety tips like I always do. And you guys have a great week. And make it your best week. And stay safe, okay? Bye.